Item number 1, Control of Economic Activity, Occupied Territories Bill 2018. Second stage, private members' business. The question is that the bill be now read a second time, and I call on Senator Frances Black to speak. You have 12 minutes.
Thank you very much. I just want to start by saying I'm really delighted to table the Occupied Territories Bill 2018, and I'd like to welcome you, Tánaiste, to the Chamber today, and thank you for your sincere engagement and input to date on this. I'd also like to warmly welcome Palestinian Ambassador Ahmed Abdel Razak and Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who are watching from the public gallery. I want to acknowledge the fantastic work of Trócaire, Christian Aid, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions and Sadaka in helping to prepare this legislation, as well their years of research and advocacy on the issue. I'd especially like to thank Michael Lynn, Senior Counsel, and James Crawford, Professor of International Law at Cambridge University, for their written legal input to ensure the bill is robust in its compliance with EU and WTO trade rules. At its core, the bill is about respecting international law and standing up for the rights of vulnerable people. It is a chance for Ireland to state strongly that it does not support the illegal confiscation of land and the human suffering that inevitably results. As the issue can be complex, I'd like to outline briefly what the bill seeks to do and why. In practical terms, what we are dealing with here is a breach of international humanitarian law when one state has occupied another. It is about the construction of illegal settlements beyond internationally recognised borders as a means of slowly confiscating land and natural resources. International law is clear on this. Such settlements violate the 4th Geneva Convention's prohibition on the transfer of a civilian population into occupied territory and constitute a war crime. Importantly, they also break domestic Irish law. Despite this, Ireland continues to provide economic support through trade in settlement goods. The most high-profile, clearly documented modern example is the Israeli settlement of the Palestinian West Bank, which has been repeatedly condemned by the EU, UN and Irish Government, who, I want to quote directly, they state that Ireland and its EU partners have a clear position on Israeli settlements. The West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Gaza and the Golan Heights, are territories which have been occupied by Israel since 1967. Israeli settlements are illegal under international law, constitute an obstacle to peace and threaten to make a two-state solution to the conflict impossible. That peaceful solution is what we should all be seeking. But trade in settlement goods is fundamentally undermining it. In the occupied Palestinian territories, people are forcibly kicked out of their homes, fertile farming land is seized, and the fruit and vegetables produced are then exported to pay for it all. We strongly condemn the settlements, but support them economically. As international law is clear that the settlements are illegal, then the goods they produce are effectively the proceeds of crime. We must face up to this. We cannot keep supporting breaches of international humanitarian law and violations of people's human rights. That's what this bill seeks to do. It can end our complicity by prohibiting the import and sales of goods from illegal settlements, as well as Irish involvement in the provision of settlement services and the extraction of natural resources. Section 3 outlines the scope of this legislation, which is important given the variety of military occupations around the world. If enacted, the bill will apply by default to territories where there is clear international legal consensus on the status of the occupation, as outlined in judgments of international courts like the ICJ and ICC. This includes the occupied Palestinian territories. It then provides for the option to go beyond this, but only where there is agreement between the Minister and both houses of the Oireachtas. This is an objective standard that works on the basis of consensus. We begin from the most limited position, relying on legal certainty, and move beyond that only if the Houses agree. The principle remains the same, however, and the application of the bill could be extended to territories where a similar case for occupation can be made. It is also really important to be clear that this is not a boycott of Israel or a ban on Israeli products. We must be accurate on this. We are making the same distinction that the EU does between goods from Israel and goods from illegal settlements beyond its borders. In 2012, Then Taoiseach Eamon Gilmore outlined this important distinction. He said, "I have previously stated that Ireland would support a ban on settlement products. We do not support bans or boycotts on Israel, and this is not in question, but the products of illegal settlements constitute a separate and specific matter. I'd urge my colleagues to keep this vital distinction in mind. To me, this issue matters because of the devastating impact it has on human lives on the ground. This is what I'm concerned with. The little girl whose horizons are bounded by soldiers and a steel fence, whose family suffers from deprivation because they can no longer farm their land. It is the child who goes without eating because what was once food on the table is now harvested and sold around the world to pay for occupation. I stand today in opposition to this war crime, not because of the abstract legal principles, but because of the very real human suffering caused on the ground. This is the daily reality in the occupied West Bank. The construction of illegal settlements has seen extreme water shortages, lack of electricity, restrictions on movement, house demolitions and land confiscation. Over 500,000 settlers have been transferred into the area, supported with financial incentives and highly subsidised housing. As land is gradually confiscated, it becomes increasingly difficult to provide basic services, and the viability of a functioning Palestinian state is undermined. A 2013 World Bank study found that this has cost the Palestinian economy $3.4 billion. Meanwhile, agricultural produce and other goods from the settlements have appeared on Irish shelves, sustaining this injustice. I'd like to quote directly from field research carried out while preparing for this bill. This is from a farmer in the West Bank who told Troker's partner NGO that "my family was forcibly displaced in 1967 when our land was annexed. The village's structures were demolished and levelled out to establish an agricultural settlement. Every day I watch settlers expand their land and cultivate it with grapes and almonds, while we are not allowed. I work in the settlements because I'm forced in order to provide for my family. I feel overwhelmed and bad every time I work as a paid labourer, watching settlers grow on the land I inherited from my parents. I always imagine how my life would have turned out if I had control over my land, as well as how my children's lives would turn out. It's a horrible feeling to see my land a couple of metres away, but not being able to access it due to the annexation fence, part of the annexation wall. Today we can take a stand against this kind of injustice. A ban on settlement goods is not a radical ask. It is a disassociation with clear breaches of international humanitarian law and human rights abuses. It is a modest, tangible step we can take. It has long been called for within the Oireachtas. In 2012, the Joint Committee on Foreign Affairs and Trade, with members from across the political parties, called for such a move on the basis that it could have a strong and effective impact on suffering in the region. 6 years ago, the Irish Government criticised the relentless progress of Israeli settlements and said that they could seek an EU ban if matters continued to worsen. In the years since then, it has only gone one way, with settlements expanding, more homes being demolished and land confiscated. Last year, the Israeli government approved the construction of the first new settlement in 20 years, and this month alone sanctioned the construction of over 1,000 new settlement homes. It is clear that mere condemnation simply has not worked. As long as we support the settlements economically, as long as they remain profitable, they will continue to grow. Concerns have been raised over our capacity to do this as a member of the EU. And on this point, I would refer to the formal legal opinions provided by Michael Lynn and Professor James Crawford. Yes, the EU's governing treaties outline common trade rules, but Article 36 provides for exceptions where they can be justified on the basis of public policy or the protection of the health and life of humans. Member States are perfectly entitled to seek derogations when it serves a fundamental interest of the state, such as ensuring respect for international humanitarian law or indeed our own domestic laws. This is made absolutely clear in the legal opinions, which I am happy to share with my colleagues, where is at issue here is not legal capacity but political will. I fully agree that a coordinated EU action would be fantastic, but the Taoiseach himself told the Dáil last week that there is just no prospect of that happening. At the EU level, we are at a point of paralysis, as we have been for decades. In this context, Ireland has a responsibility to show some leadership. We've done so before. In 1980, we were the first European state to recognise the PLO, and our neighbours soon followed. When the EU decided in 2015 to issue labelling guidelines for settlement goods, it did so as a result of Member States taking the lead. The UK moved first in 2009, followed by Denmark in 2013, Belgium 2014, and then the EU as a whole 1 year later. This is collective action spurred by individual action. The economic impact here would be low based on EU and Irish estimates. We can put the value of settlement imports at roughly €1 million per year. Given the small figures involved, this is not going to cost Irish jobs. In reality, it would mean showing that certain products are produced in the settlements and asking a supermarket not to stock them. The financial impact is small, but the political and symbolic importance is significant. I think back to the brave Duns workers who stood out against apartheid in 1984. This was not just about the money, but the principle. They refused to be complicit, and so should we. But this is not simply about taking a stand. It's about offering a real practical step that other states can follow. Certainly, there will be questions over how well exporters are obeying the EU's own labelling guidelines. But these are the issues that deserve to be examined in detail at committee stage if we agree to this proposal in principle. There is a wealth of information available, for example, linking specific products to specific settlements, most recently from a coalition of 22 human rights organisations working in the region. What's clear is that a peaceful two-state solution has never been under greater pressure. I've spoken with you, Taoiseach, and I recognise and respect your genuine determination to work on this issue, but I believe that Ireland needs to be firm in stating that our foreign policy will always respect international humanitarian law and human rights, and that illegal expansion is not acceptable. We have a duty to stand up to injustice, and we owe it to those living at the sharp end of occupation. I ask my colleagues to take that stand today.